Review of Unit 2. Topics covered in this unit are demand, supply, market equilibrium. Market forces of demand and supply. Supply and demand are the forces that make market economies work. Market economies are open economies that allow the free flow of goods and services between producers and consumers based on demand and supply. Demand and supply show how buyers and sellers behave or interact with one another to determine prices in the market economy. A market is a place where buyers and sellers meet to exchange goods and services. A competitive market is a market in which there are so many buyers and sellers trading identical or standardized product that each has a negligible impact on the market price. Demand. In this we cover meaning of demand and quantity demanded, factors determining demand which includes price, income, wealth, price of related goods, consumer expectation, taste and preference, market size and number of consumers. Then law of demand, income effect and substitution effect, demand schedule and curve, individual demand versus market demand, movement along the demand curve or change in quantity demanded versus shift in demand or change in demand. Meaning of demand and quantity demanded. Demand is a desire backed by willingness and ability to pay for it. We say willing and able because willingness alone is not effective in the market. You may be willing to buy a plasma television set, but if that willingness is not backed by the necessary dollars, it will not be effective and therefore will not be reflected in the market. Quantity demanded is the amount or the number of units of a product that a household would buy in a given period at the current market price. Factors influencing demand. Price is the major factor influencing demand. At higher prices, people demand less of the good, and at low prices, demand more. Income. The sum of all the household's wages, salaries, profits, interest payments, rents, and other forms of earning in a given period of time. It is a flow measure. We must specify a time period to it, income per month or per year. Households with higher income can afford to buy more goods and services. In general, you would expect higher demand at higher income level of income and lower demand at lower level of income. Products whose demand varies directly with money income are called superior goods and normal goods. Goods for which demand tends to fall when income rises or whose demand varies inversely with money income are called inferior goods. Wealth. Wealth is the money of assets you own like money and property. In other words, net worth, the amount a household would have left if it sold all of its possessions and paid all of its debts. Wealth is a stock measure. It is measured at a given point in time. Examples are stock of valuable possessions like gold, shares and bonds, value of your house or your car. If in a given period you spend less than your income, you save. The amount that you save is added to your wealth. Saving is a flow that affects the stock of wealth. When you spend more than your income you do save, you reduce your wealth. If household experience an increase in their wealth, example, house prices rise, then they will be more willing to spend. In general, you would expect higher demand at higher level of wealth and lower demand at lower level of wealth. Price of related goods. A change in the price of related good may either increase or decrease demand for a product, depending on whether the related good is a substitute or a complement. A substitute good is one that can be used in place of another good. A complementary good is one that is used together with another good. When two products are substitute, an increase in the price of one will increase the demand for the other. An increase in price of a coffee will increase the demand for tea because people shift to less expensive goods. In case of complementary goods like tire and car, if the price of the car increases, demand for tire, its complement decreases. Conversely, if the price of a complement, for example, falls, tuition, the demand for related good textbook will increase. Consumer expectation about future income, wealth and prices. Changing in consumer expectation may shift demand. A newly formed expectation of higher future prices may cause consumers to buy now in order to beat the anticipated price rises, thus increasing current demand. Or workers who become fearful of losing their jobs may reduce the demand for, say, vacation travel. Changes in taste and preferences. New products may affect consumer taste. For example, the introduction of digital cameras greatly decreased the demand for film cameras. Consumers' concern over the health hazards of cholesterol and obesity have increased the demand for broccoli low-calorie beverages, and fresh fruit while decreasing the demand for beef, meat, eggs, and whole milk. Market size and number of consumers. The greater the number of consumers of a good, the greater the market demand for it. When the sellers expand to a new market to distribute goods, or when there is a growth in the population, the demand for a specific good can also escalate. Law of demand. Law of demand states other things equal when the price of a good rises, the quantity demanded of the good falls. When the price falls, the quantity demanded rises. In other words, quantity demanded and price have an inverse or opposite relationship. Higher the price, lower the demand, lower the price, higher the demand. What explains the law of demand? Economists have explained the law of demand in terms of income effect and substitution effect. In other words, law of demand works because of these two effects. The income effect indicates that the lower price increases the purchasing power of buyers' money income, enabling the buyer to purchase more of the product than before. A higher price has the opposite effect. The substitution effect suggests that at a lower price, buyers have the incentive to substitute what is now a less expensive product for other products that are now relatively more expensive. The products whose price has fallen is now a better deal relative to the other products. For example, a decline in the price of chicken will increase purchasing power of consumer incomes, enabling people to buy more chicken, the income effect. At the low price, chicken is relatively more attractive and consumers tend to substitute it for pork, lamb, beef, and fish, the substitution effect. The income and substitution effect combine to make consumers able and willing to buy more of a product at a lower price than at a higher price. Demand schedule and demand curve. Demand schedule is a table that shows how much of a good or service consumers will be willing and able to buy at different prices. It shows the relationship between the price of a good and the quantity demanded, holding constant everything else that influences how much consumers of the good want to buy. Demand curve is a graph of the relationship between the price of the good and the quantity demanded, individual demand versus market demand. The demand schedule or curve shows an individual's demand for the product. To analyze how market work, we need to determine the market demand, the sum of all the individual demand for a particular good or service. We sum the individual demand curve horizontally to obtain the market demand curve. Individual demand schedule and curve. Table below shows Alex's demand schedule for gasoline. Table shows that at low prices, Alex buys more gasoline. At higher prices, she buys less. Thus, there is a negative or inverse relationship between quantity demanded and price. Demand curves have a negative slope, indicating the inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded. It is downward sloping, reflects that people buy more at lower prices because consumers are subject to law of diminishing marginal utility. Successive units of a particular product yield less and less marginal utility. Consumers will buy additional units only if the price of those units is progressively reduced. Market demand schedule and curve. The market demand curve D is the horizontal summation of the individual demand curve D1, D2, and D3 of all the consumers in the market. At the price of $3, for example, the three individual curves quantity demanded of 100 bushels equals 35 plus 39 plus 26. Movement along the demand curve or change in quantity demanded versus shift in demand or change in demand. A change in quantity demanded is a movement from one point to another point from one price quantity combination to another on a fixed demand curve. It is called movement along the demand curve. The change in quantity demanded brought about by a change in price. In contrast, a change in demand is a shift of the demand curve to the right, an increase in demand, or to the left, a decrease in demand. When any of the other factors that influence demand change, however, a new relationship between price and quantity demanded is established. This is a shift of a demand curve. The result then is a new demand curve. Changes in income, preferences, or prices of other goods cause a demand curve to shift. It means at the same price, people demand more or less than earlier. Change in price of a good or service leads to change in quantity demanded, that is movement along the demand curve. Change in income, preferences of other goods or services leads to change in demand or shift of the demand curve. Supply. This includes topics like meaning of supply, law of supply, factors determining supply, supply schedule and supply curve, individual supply versus change in quantity supplied, or movement along the supply curve versus change in supply or shift in supply. Meaning of supply and quantity supplied. Supply is the amount of goods and services available for sale in the market. Quantity supplied is the actual amount of good or service producers are willing and able to sell at some specific price. The two key words in the definition of supply are willingness and ability. If the prices in the market is too low, then sellers may not be willing to offer the producer for sale. Also, if the weather is bad and the farmer's crop of fruit and vegetables are ruined, they'll not be able to supply anything for the market. In other words, they'll not afford produce for sale if they do not have both the willingness and ability to do so. Law of supply. The law of supply states that other things remaining the same when prices decrease, quantity supplied decreases, price increases, quantity supplied increases. So you find a direct or a positive relationship between quantity supplied and price. Higher the price, higher the supply, lower the price, lower the supply. Supply schedule and supply curve. A supply schedule is a table that shows how much of a good or service an individual producer is willing and able to offer for sale at each price in a market. A supply curve is a graphical representation of supply schedule. It shows the relationship between supply and price. Individual supply schedule and curve. The supply schedule for corn is plotted to yield the corresponding supply curve, which shows how much of a good an individual producer is willing to sell at any given price. The supply curve and the supply schedule reflect the fact that supply curves are usually upward sloping and quantity supplied rises when the price rises. Minimum supply price. The supply curve can be interpreted as a minimum supply price curve, a curve that shows the lowest price at which someone is willing to sell. This lowest price is the marginal cost. If a small quantity is produced, the lowest price at which someone is willing to sell one more unit is low. But as the quantity produced increases, the marginal cost of each additional unit rises. So the lowest price at which someone is willing to sell the additional unit rises along the supply curve. The market schedule and curve. To obtain market supply, we sum the quantity supplied by each producer at each price. That is, we obtain the market supply curve by horizontally adding the supply curve of the individual producers. Factors determining supply. Resource price. The price of the resources used in the production process help determine the cost of production incurred by firms. Higher resource prices raise production cost and squeeze profits. That reduction in profits reduces the incentive for firms to supply output at each product price. For example, an increase in the price of sand, crushed rock, or Portland cement will increase the cost of producing concrete and reduce its supply. In contrast, lower resource prices reduce production cost and increase profits. So when resources prices fall, firms supply greater output at each product price. For example, a decrease in the price of iron ore will decrease the price of steel. Prices related to goods. Prices of related goods that firms produce influence supply. For example, if the price of beef rises, the supply of cowhide increases. Beef and cowhide are complements in production, goods that must be produced together. An increase in the price of cucumbers decreases the supply of watermelons. Producers switch from production of watermelon to cucumbers because both are substitutes in production, goods that can be produced by using the same resources. Expected future prices. If the expected future price of a good rises, the return from selling the good in the future increases and is higher than it is today. So supply decreases today and increases in the future. For example, an expectation of a substantial rise in future log prices decreases the supply of log today. The number of suppliers. The larger the number of firms that produce a good, the greater is the supply of the good. As new firms enter an industry, the supply in that industry increases. As firms leave an industry, the supply in that industry decreases. For example, an increase in the number of tattoo parlors increases the supply of tattoos. The formation of women's professional basketball leagues increases the supply of women's professional basketball games. Changes in quantity supplied, movement along the supply curve versus change in supply or shift in supply. A change in quantity supplied is a movement from one point to another on a fixed supply curve. The cause of such a movement is a change in the price of the specific product being considered. A change in supply means a change in the schedule and a shift of the curve. An increase in supply shifts the curve to the right, a decrease in supply shifts it to the left. The cause of a change in supply is a change in one or more of the determinants of supply. Equilibrium. In this, we'll study how the intersection of demand and supply creates market equilibrium. what is disequilibrium, and changes in equilibrium. An equilibrium is a situation in which opposing forces balance each other. The equilibrium price, market clearing price, is the price at which the quantity demanded equals the quantity supplied. The equilibrium quantity is the quantity bought and sold at the equilibrium price. Competition among buyers and among sellers drives the price to the equilibrium price. Once there, it will remain there unless it is subsequently disturbed by changes in demand and supply shifts of the curves. With neither a shortage nor a surplus, the market is in equilibrium, meaning in balance or at rest. Market equilibrium. Market equilibrium. In the figure, the intersection of the downsloping demand curve D and the upsloping supply curve S indicates the equilibrium price and quantity, here $3 and 7,000 bushels of corn. In an equilibrium market, there are neither surpluses nor shortages for a good or service. Equilibrium is thus the state in which market supply and demand balance each other, and as a result, prices become stable. Price adjustment or disequilibrium. When there is imbalance in supply and demand in the market, leading to either shortage or supply, causing a disequilibrium market. Market forces in a free economy tend to restore disequilibrium states back to their equilibrium. A shortage forces the prices up. Any price below the $3 equilibrium price would create a shortage. Quantity demanded would exceed quantity supplied. Consider a $2 price, for example. In figure, that quantity demanded exceeds quantity supplied at that price. The result is a shortage or excess demand of 7,000 bushels of corn. The $2 price discourages sellers from devoting resources to corn and encourages consumers to desire more bushels than are available. The $2 price cannot persist as an equilibrium price. Many consumers who want to buy corn at this price will not obtain it. They will express a willingness to pay more than $2 to get corn. Competition among these buyers will drive up the price, eventually to the $3 equilibrium price. Unless disrupted by changes of supply and demand, this $3 price of corn will continue to prevail. A surplus forces the price down. At any above equilibrium price, quantity supplied exceeds quantity demanded. For example, at the $4 price, sellers will offer 10,000 bushels of corn, but buyers will purchase only 4,000. The $4 price encourages sellers to offer lots of corn but discourages many consumers from buying it. The result is a surplus or excess supply of 6,000 bushels. If corn sellers produced them all, they would find themselves with 6,000 unsold bushels of corn. Surpluses drive prices down. Even if the $4 price existed temporarily, they could not persist. The large surplus would prompt competing sellers to lower the price to encourage buyers to take the surplus off their hands. As the price fell, the incentive to produce corn would decline and the incentive for consumers to buy corn would increase. As shown in the figure, the market would move to the equilibrium at $3. Changes in supply, demand, and equilibrium. We know that demand might change because of fluctuations in consumer taste or incomes. Changes in consumer expectations or variations in the price of related goods. Supply might change in response to changes in resource prices, technology, or taxes. We will now analyze the effects will such changes in supply and demand have on equilibrium price and quantity. Three scenarios are a change in market equilibrium due to shift in demand, a change in market equilibrium due to shift in supply, shift in both demand and supply. A change in market equilibrium due to shift in supply. When supply shifts to the right, that is, increase in supply from S1 to S2, the market will settle at a new equilibrium with a lower price and a higher quantity. When supply shifts to the left, decrease in supply from S3 to S4, the market will settle at a new equilibrium with a higher price and a lower quantity. Shift in both demand and supply. There are four combinations of how the supply and demand curves can shift simultaneously. You can see these in the figure below. The first is both supply and demand increase, or it shifts right. So in this case, if supply increase, the quantity increases. If demand increase, then also quantity increases. So in both the scenarios, the quantity increases, but price could increase, decrease, or stay the same it is indeterminate. It depends which is more dominant, supply or demand. If the increase in supply is more dominant, then the prices decrease. If the demand increase is more dominant, then price will increase. In the second scenario, both supply and demand decrease. That means it shifts left side. In both the cases, if supply decreases, quantity decreases. If demand decreases, then also quantity decreases. So in both the cases, quantity decreases, but price, again, it is indeterminate. It could either increase, decrease, or stay the same. Supply increase or demand decrease. This is the third scenario. In this case, supply shifts right, demand shifts left. In both the cases, the price decreases. If supply increase, then also price decrease. If demand decrease, then also price decrease. But in case of quantity, it could either increase, decrease, or stay the same. It is indeterminate. The fourth scenario is supply decrease, demand increase. In both the cases, price increases. If the supply decrease, then also price increases. If demand increase, then also price increases. But quantity could either increase, decrease, or stay the same. This is the table form of effects of changes in both supply and demand. The first column you see change in supply, second is change in demand, then it's effects on equilibrium price and effects on equilibrium quantity.